Hello, Chris of the planet Earth. It is good to see you again.
Optimus! Hey!
Chris, can you please make an episode about my fellow Transformers?
Can do, Optimus Prime. Always happy to help.
I have to leave now for a galactic peace conference.
Sounds good. Just give me a moment to get clear. No. Oh, no. No. Ah!
I'll be back soon to transform your day into an adventure.
Hello, welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. Transformers, one of my favorite things growing up. Now, initially, that started here in the United States 40 years ago when Hasbro began licensing various toy lines from Japan, changing robots into all sorts of cool things. And from there, oh my God, has this franchise exploded in a huge way. Comics, cartoons, live-action movies, crossover toys, video games, all sorts of amazing things. And one unique aspect of Transformers, in my opinion, is just how much it's actually crossed over with other franchises, intellectual properties, toy lines, video games, comics, cartoons. It's crossed over with a bonkers amount of stuff. So today, I thought we'd have some fun by doing a ranked tier list. And the great news is, whatever I choose, I'm positive that nobody on the internet will have any disagreements at all, and it'll be nothing but nice comments down below. Just really nice to think about. But, like I said, 40 years. And speaking of the 40th anniversary of Transformers, that brings up today's sponsor. Dynamite Comics right now has a campaign on Kickstarter for Transformers 40th Anniversary Limited Edition trading cards. This campaign offers exclusive high-end trading cards in two sets. A traditional collector's series with original Transformers packaging art, holo foil, and metal cards. And a deluxe ultra premium series that has base cards, sketch cards, and line art cards. Both sets also have signed cards. You might find cards with the art of Transformers comics creators Bob Budiansky, or connecting cards to make a giant poster. The campaign offers unique card binders and also has already unlocked 3 stretch goals, giving supporters even more unique cards. And when it comes to crowd-funded campaigns, I can say from personal experience that Dynamite has a great track record of delivering in a timely manner. I say that because I did a cover with them. Thank you again, Dynamite, for this opportunity. And Transformers is something I have been passionate about since I was a kid. Yeah, I had a lot of the toys, but I remember just spending hours poring over the box art and the promotional art. I remember trying to memorize all the characters' names. It was a blast. It's still a blast. Transformers is going strong, and you can have a unique collectible regarding Transformers by supporting the 40th Anniversary Limited Edition Trading Card Campaign. With all that said, let's get into the tier list. First, let's take a look at Marvel Comics, because they did the first crossover. Issue 3 of the comic book has a crossover with the Marvel Universe. Look at that. Spider-Man gets to meet the Autobots and Decepticons and goes one-on-one against Megatron. I remember thinking that that was an absolute blast. And then later, we did get some other Marvel crossovers that were always a bit of a surprise. For instance, Death's Head made an appearance in Transformers comics. And that character also crossed over with things like Doctor Who and the Marvel Universe. And then cut to over 2 decades later, and Transformers had a second crossover, this time with the New Avengers. Personally, I think I just have to put this at A tier. It's not necessarily the ultimate best stories, period, so it can't quite be S tier, but it was the first. That counts for a lot. Spider-Man against Transformers, that was a blast. Death's Head, super unique character. It's really cool that that character crossed over with Transformers as well as other things. Yeah, for me, this is A tier. G.I. Joe. Obviously, if you're reading the comics these days, you know that Transformers and G.I. Joe are part of the Energon universe with the Image comics, but there is a long history of Transformers and G.I. Joe crossing over. Marvel did a limited series, and that was kind of a weird story. It had all the characters from both sides, and the story actually affected the ongoing Transformers comic because Bumblebee got blown up and later rebuilt as Goldbug. Oddly, the G.I. Joe comics did not acknowledge the crossover. However, in later years, while still at Marvel, G.I. Joe had Megatron team up with Cobra. So they've got a pair of Marvel crossovers. Then, when IDW got a hold of it, oh my god, Tom Scioli made one of the most bonkers and brilliant crossovers you've ever seen with Transformers versus G.I. Joe. It just does all sorts of crazy, unexpected things and really sort of feels like kids playing with the toys and making up the most original, creative story you can imagine. The Rise of the Beasts movie included a weird teaser for a G.I. Joe crossover, but that's not my favorite aspect because ultimately it just amounted to a business card. The cartoon had some fun Easter eggs like the same news reporter. Cobra Commander actually appeared in an episode of Season 3 of Transformers, set in the future as a guy called Old Snake. And there was a new character in that season, Marissa Fairborn, who was the future set daughter of Flint and Lady J from G.I. Joe. And then we have the Energon universe, where it just feels big and connected, but it also feels like each book is able to just do its own thing. There's Void Rivals, G.I. Joe, Transformers, and characters and concepts are crossing over. It feels like a really big interconnected world. But fortunately, each of the creators are just being allowed to go nuts. And one thing that they have that's an advantage is that they're like 40 years into all of this lore, so they can remix these ideas knowing where it's going, knowing what characters are going to be introduced. So for me, I think Transformers G.I. Joe just fits together really well. Congrats, Hasbro. I don't know if we'll ever get a great live-action movie crossover, but we've had a lot of great comics, no question. This is S tier. Friday the 13th. Yes, this is a weird one, but actor Travis Van Winkle played the character Trent DeMarco in the first live-action Transformers movie. And then that same actor played a character with that same name in the Friday the 13th remake that was produced by Michael Bay, director of that Transformers movie. Weird, unexpected, doesn't really amount to anything. I gotta put this at a D tier. Nobody needed it. Angry Birds was both a video game collaboration and a comic book. The Transformers portion of the comic isn't drawn that great. Once you get to the Angry Birds portion, it looks a lot better. But ultimately, I'd say, so the comic, maybe not so great, but the game was actually pretty fun, and you didn't have to spend money to play. I played this game. I think it's fair to put this at a C. It's enjoyable. It's not that bad. It's not spectacular. Right in the middle, I think that's fair. Mars Attacks. This was a one-shot comic, and the idea of two different alien factions battling each other on Earth is a little bit fun. I especially liked the scene where the Insecticons battled the giant ants that the Mars Attacks aliens brought with them. I wish that it did a little bit more. This one, unfortunately, in just a one-shot, feels very, very rushed. A lot happens. It's funny, but it's too fast. Ultimately, that means I'm going to put it C tier. My Little Pony. Well, Hasbro obviously had good luck with G.I. Joe and Transformers. Would they have luck crossing over their other big property, My Little Pony? Well, these are two very different types of stories. They're both toys, but they obviously have pretty different audiences, different tones. I didn't think that the artwork was bad at all. I thought that that was good. I thought there were some cute jokes, but I think it's very much aimed more at the My Little Pony audience than the majority of the Transformers audience. I have to give this one a D on the tier list. They just didn't work together tonally perfectly. A toy that became a comic that did work a lot better was ROM. ROM was also space-based. He was basically a cyborg. He was encased in armor. He's a space knight. And in this story, he rescues a Transformer that actually joins the Space Knights. I thought that that was a cool idea. I felt that the lore fit together very well. I thought that the artwork worked pretty well. It might be a little lore heavy for some people, but I think it earns at least a B. Visionaries. Well, this was another toy line by Hasbro, but a much, much, much shorter-lived one. It had a brief cartoon. It had one wave of toys. At least I think it was one wave. Maybe there were a few more. I actually did have some of these action figures as a kid, and the toys were great because they were bigger than G.I. Joe, but they had the same articulation all the way around. The O-ring in the middle, the swivel arm battle grip, and they had holograms. The toys were great. The media, it was average. It was just not an era where people were ready to get into knights. They were into sort of fantasy stuff with He-Man, but somehow Visionaries just didn't quite connect. And the comic, it just feels tonally way too different. There are also lots of scenes of a lot of exposition. I just felt like magic didn't fit very well with the Transformers themselves. I don't feel good about it, but I'm going to give this one an F. I wanted to like it, but it just didn't work for me. Star Trek. Now, Star Trek is a huge property, but you know what? It has some great ideas. It arguably goes a little too long. This comic uses the animated Star Trek as its basis, and the artwork absolutely looks like that style. However, there's a difference between animated cartoons that have a simple style because they're still moving and how they look in a comic book. It just looks very empty to me after a while. It just didn't work for me personally. Your mileage there may vary. However, there were some clever things. For instance, I really like this title, Prime's Directive. Good reference to both properties. I enjoyed the Transforming Enterprise. That really should have been a toy. But the Enterprise crew also runs around in their own robots. Maybe you'd call them Transtectors if you're a huge Transformers nerd. But that part wasn't as cool as I would have anticipated. Ultimately, I give this a C. It's enjoyable, it's just not perfect. The X-Files. Now, the X-Files should theoretically work. I mean, we've got FBI agents looking into extraterrestrial life. Well, that's what the Transformers are. It feels like it could have worked. But this issue used the lone gunmen. And that's not as interesting to me as Mulder and Scully, the main characters. Also, unfortunately, in this specific issue, I didn't care for the artwork. This artwork might work for others. I felt like it was kind of scratchy and dark. I didn't feel like it highlighted any of the cast in a flattering way. It just wasn't super easy to read storytelling-wise. And I feel bad about it, but I give this one an E. It could have been worse, but it didn't work. I wanted it to. For me, it didn't. The Terminator. Now, the Terminator is an interesting idea. We've got robots. We've got basically cyborgs, I admit, but underneath it, it's a robot. And we've got AI. There's a lot of thematic stuff you could explore there. The artwork isn't bad, but here's the problem that I did have with it, is that it radically changes the lore. What they say in this comic is that humanity created the Terminators and Skynet to protect them from the Transformers. So in the future, Terminator robots and Transformers are battling, and a Terminator is sent back in time to stop the Transformers from being woken up. And weirdly enough, he even teams up with Sarah Connor, which is a total coincidence. Terminator has had some other cool crossovers. The crossover it had with RoboCop, Frank Miller and Walt Simonson came up with a heck of a great story where their technology is integrated. historically. I thought that that was pretty interesting. Terminator and Transformers, the one thing I feel that kept it from being great is that Terminator at its core, sometimes it's action, but it's kind of horror in that original idea. That's kind of gone from this. I give it a C. It's still kind of fun. It just tonally isn't quite what I wanted, and I don't love the changes to the Terminator lore. Ghostbusters. You know, I have to say, this comic is legit funny. It's got some very creative ideas. There is Ghost Starscream. Starscream was a ghost in the cartoon. That's a cool idea to explore in the comics. It's got a transforming Ecto-1. That became a toy. It's really cool. And there's a funny idea where Starscream pulls a race stance because he summons the form of Cybertron's Destructor, and of course Starscream has an ego, so the Destructor takes the form of a massive Starscream that just kills all the Decepticons. I didn't expect to like this as much as I did. I like Transformers and I like Ghostbusters. I didn't know that it could fit together so well, but it does. The Ghostbusters busting Transformers ghosts, it's funny and it's cool, and I give it a B. Lego. Now, there have only been 2 official Lego sets, Optimus Prime and Bumblebee. But I will say this, they actually transform. And I'm sorry, but that is cool enough for me to give it an A. I think that the build itself is interesting and not repetitive. The quality is great. It really holds together in a good way. It's posable. These are some really nice sets. Optimus Prime is arguably a lot better than Bumblebee, but they're both pretty fun. Decent value as far as Lego goes. Easy to give it that rating. Now I'm going to talk about one that I've only seen a little bit of, to be fair. Mazinger Z. So this is a famous manga and anime that had a manga crossover with Transformers. Transformers are incredibly popular over in Japan, but what that means is that it hasn't been translated into English, so everything I've read has been pieces of it, scenes. And I do read Japanese, but slowly, so I feel like I'm not getting the full experience in my review. Let me talk about it a little, though. The cool thing about Mazinger Z is that he was the first real super robot, a giant robot. There had been other robots in manga and anime, but Mazinger Z was definitely hugely influential and probably led to characters like the Transformers. This manga also uses major characters from both franchises, tons of characters, and it even ends with Mazinger Z's creator, Go Nagai, making a cameo. I think that that's tremendously respectful. I'm willing to be proven wrong on this, but I think it deserves an S tier. Mazinger Z is something that definitely influenced Transformers. I think it's really cool that it had a crossover. If somebody out there has read the full thing, maybe you've got a correction for me, but from what I've seen, it gives you everything you'd want. Back to the Future. Back to the Future did give us a cool Transformers toy. It's cool to see the DeLorean transform into a robot. The story itself, it has some good gags, but I would argue that the story moves things a bit too far into a dark, post-apocalyptic future that the heroes have to beat, and that takes it a little too far away from being a comedy, which, at its core, is Back to the Future's genre. Also, at the very end, it gets very complex, some would argue convoluted, with their timey-wimey solution. It's a little weird. The artwork is also fairly inconsistent. Sometimes it's cartoony, sometimes it looks like it's referenced from famous scenes that we've seen in the movie. It's got some good gags, it's got a good toy. I'll put it on the C tier. And the final one I can think of, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, as far as I know, this has only been one toy, but I'll say something. It's a pretty great toy. This transforms from their van into a robot. You get the weapons for all 4 turtles, which can actually be attached, so nothing has to be left separate. The heads are swappable so that you can have it be your favorite turtle, and then the heads can clip on underneath the back in the shell area. The chest can look like the front of the van, or you can put it on the arm as a shield. It's posable, it transforms well, and there's even a unique gimmick where you can rotate the belt here so that you can have the letter of your favorite turtle. I think that this is a great toy. It needs some media to go with it, so I'll give it an A. It's not quite S tier, it needs some media to go with it, but this is a great toy. So, what do you think? Did I get it right? I'm sure that not everybody agrees. That's fine. But Transformers is way more versatile than you would think. Most toy lines can't cross over with that many different things. They just haven't. Some have, but not many. It's not common for a toy line to typically last more than about 5 years at best. 5 years is considered a very successful toy line. Transformers has been going for 40 years here in the States. That's some real longevity. And some of that is that it can be remixed and rebooted, and it can cross over with other weird things. And I think that that adds to its lifespan. I hope you had fun. Please consider checking out my sponsor. Dynamite has some amazing cards in this set. You've got the original art, you've got art from comic book covers and interior art, you've got concept designs, line art, signed cards, hollow foil cards, poster cards, just all sorts of cool cards. Thank you very much for the sponsorship. Thank you all for watching. You guys make it worth doing. I had a lot of fun with this one. I grew up with Transformers. I'll always love it. I'll see you real soon. And until I see you next time, keep reading comics. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching this show. It was a lot of fun to make. Obviously, I just sort of riffed on it a little bit lightly, but I wanted to get something out because I am taking a week off to go out to New York for New York Comic Con, and I just wanted to put something out before I took that time off, and then I'll come right back. I think I'll probably end the month, if I can, I'm gonna try, with my top 10 horror comics that came out in the past year. And then I'm working on some deep dive stuff. I've hinted at some of that before, but I've got some bigger episodes. I'm just trying to mix that in with, the occasional review or, funny episode looking at a Golden Age hero. By the way, I've got a second channel, Pros and Cons. I like to mention that. There's a link in the description below for that too. I do a Monday live stream where I recap comic book news and quick reviews of the comics that have come out, as well as have interviews with creators. Recently, we've had people like Jim Zup come on to talk about Conan. That was a lot of fun. I've got Brandon Montclair coming soon to talk about Moon Girl and, of course, DuckTales. And then I also do a show on there about schlock movies, and recently my friend Jim Mafood and I had Rob Schraub on to talk about Halloween 3. This is a t-shirt that Rob Schraub made, Halloween 3 Part 2. Oh my god, I think that you guys are really going to like that. Just trying to have fun this season. Thank you for all the kind comments to the last episode I uploaded, the Jeff Darrow interview. What a privilege. Anyway, you've heard enough from me. I'll be back real soon. Until then, just keep reading comics, have a safe and happy Halloween, and just please, if you can, hit the like button, or leave a comment, hit subscribe. That helps. Bye.